Hi, good day and good evening, everyone, wherever you are, and welcome to IVF webinars by Egg Donation Friends. Please let me know if you can hear us correctly. I will appreciate this information and feedback about sound. So I'm Sophie, and I will be your host today. And we're here today with great fertility experts and great speakers also from IVF Spain, Dr. Jon Aizpurua, founder and president of IVF Spain Group, and Dr. Natalia Szlarb, medical director at IVF Spain. Hi, hello.
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 Good evening, everybody.
How are you, everybody, tonight?
Yes, and our great speakers will take the subject of genetic background, oocyte, sperm, and embryo analysis after failed IVF. The presentation on the topic will take around 25 minutes, and after the presentation, we will start the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, you can type those questions in the chat section, starting even now. Before we will start, I will also tell you that the webinar is being recorded and it will be available on our website tomorrow. And just in a second, I will paste all the information and the link in the chat section as well, so you will have quick access to that. Okay, so from me, that's it for now. Are you ready to start the presentation?
Sure.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. Good evening to everybody. The topic of tonight's lecture is the genetic background at the end of failed IVF. So these are the worst cases that we have to handle with. And there is certainly a genetic background. We would like to give a little bit of light in this area. But first, to put it into context, it's about the genetic background of IVF failure, and there are some relevant facts that, and the most important of them is the delay of motherhood, of parenthood. This is something which is socially dependent, and this is something that counts from the 60s and from most of the social developments our society is and was exposed to. And at the end, this leads to couples looking for parenthood beyond the age where nature has foreseen it for us. This is a very deep social, economical, and political problem. If we take a look at this slide, we will see the rates of natality in most of the European countries. You have to consider it should be 2.1 at least the natality degree of a group or a population in order just to maintain the populational volume. The fact that none of the European countries covers this means that our society, our population group is decreasing. In some countries like Germany or Spain or even Italy, southern countries more prevalent, it's around 1.5 or 1.3, which at the end would mean the decrease and the collapse of our population, despite of immigration that could compensate that. But we want to procreate ourselves too. And this child wish is something so deep and so psychologically relevant for humans that exactly for that reason, this is something we should not delay. From the preventive medical point of view, we are now in the position of offering freezing of eggs for younger patients. Yeah, then we can prevent that at the age of 35 or 40, they will find the problems that current generations are finding. In this slide here, we see the live birth per cycle. Per cycle, this means this social and populational problem led to the development of a lot of technologies. One of them is the IVF, also the genetics, and a lot. But even if we take the help of highest technologies, we can see here in the orange curve, there is a dramatic decrease beyond 30 on the live birth rates, even with help of IVF technologies. The upper curve is the live birth rates belonging to egg donation cycles, which are stable, obviously, because the age of the egg is the most impacting factor. And here we can see this quite clear. The reasons for that are inside the physiology of the woman. Women have a limited and finite number of eggs for their lifespan, which are consequently used. And at the end of the reproductive age of a woman, which may be between 15 and 45, or between 12 and 50, if we take the exceptions, there we see not only a drop in the number of eggs that are available, we also see, which is more dramatic, also a big decrease in the quality of those eggs. And this is explained now by genetic reasons. This is why we took this topic for this lecture. The older an egg, the higher the probability that during the final maturation, this means before the fertilization, some kind of chromosomic failures occur. These failures lead to abnormal number of chromosomes later on in the fertilized egg. This is in the embryo. This is the main reason for implantation failures. This is the main reason for miscarriages, and this is the main reason for newborns with some kind of impairments like Down syndrome. We call this aneuploidia, which sounds a little bit technical, but this means wrong number of chromosomes due to the incapacity of the egg of distributing the chromosomes properly, which increases dramatically with age. Here we see even the euploidy rates, so how many of the embryos a woman can provide have a chance of being sane. With 30, it's something about 60%. So 40%, this means, will not be fit enough to give us a healthy newborn. But from 40 on, it drops dramatically, down to 10, 15%, and with 45, it's close to 0. Next one, and this is reflected in the figure we saw at the beginning. Yeah, and this explains most of the problem we have to solve. Whilst younger women or even older women using younger eggs, as we see in the red line, still have stable live birth rates, those using their eggs are dramatically exposed to the decline of fertility by genetic reasons in increasing their age. This is also shown here, and this has nothing to do with the uterus. Yeah? A uterus is not that age dependent. The most critical thing for women in their expectations of motherhood is the age of their eggs. But you will also ask, and what about the male? Yeah, how deep is the impact of males? Males are by nature designed completely different. Male have not only one single egg every month and let's say 400 in their whole life, possibilities of matching and fertilizing and creating an embryo. Males have millions of sperms every day, and the fertility age of a man goes sometimes beyond 80. There are a lot of famous cases. We have shown here some of them. Men that could conceive healthy babies after 80. This is nothing exclusive to arts or film stars. This happens all around, yeah, and is universally that way. But of course, there are also some impairments regarding the male factor, also with increasing age, also from the very beginning. This means also heritated problems like dysfunctions in the sperm production, or even also genetic impairments regarding the chromosomes. But at the end of the day, the male factor doesn't contribute so much to the success. It's much more the oocyte or the egg factor. Nowadays, we have studied that with increasing age, the capacity of the sperm gets weaker. The chance of inducing some epigenetic diseases increases dramatically. Things like autism and so on are extremely higher in male that are older than 50, for example. Also, there is a link to abortions. There is a link of implantation failures, and we have a lot of technical and diagnostic tools to prove that. And honestly, we are usually not that concerned about the male factor. Why? Because we have millions of cells. If we use the appropriate technology to disclose which of them are healthier than the others, we always will find those that are linked to lower risks of healthy newborns. But at the end, what we have to look into is the quality of the embryo, which obviously is a mix of the quality of the egg and the quality of the sperm. And here, relating this to the age of the woman, yeah, we see that the female factor prominently contributes to the creation of embryos that, depending on the age, are more or less affected by genetic imbalances. Here we see an example. For example, a woman around 41, 42 just have the capability of generating 17% of their embryos being chromosomally healthy. This means 83 would never give a newborn which is healthy. And this is something to think about, because most of the couples miss exactly at this age, where the cutoff is very close, where 1 or 2 years later these chances will completely disappear. They miss the opportunity to identify those healthier and stronger embryos and to work selectively only with that. And this is something current technology can provide by the use, for example, of genetic screening on embryos. This is something which is quite popular in Spain. We are nowadays using this technology nearly for all transfers. We just transfer one embryo only when we know it is metabolically competent. This means it was able to grow into the lab up to the 5th or 6th day and make a lot of cell divisions and differentiations on cellular level. But more than this, we only transfer them if they are genetically competent. This means if they have the right number of chromosomes, because if they don't, then the chances are as good as 0. And this would be only wasted time, wasted efforts, and wasted money at the end. As I told you, the gap, the window of success is quite short at this age. So we have to be extremely precise in order to rescue their chance of conceiving with their own eggs. Unfortunately, some of them don't succeed and have to switch over to egg donation cycles, but this is obviously not our primary goal. Here we see the development of an embryo from day 1 to day 5 to day 6. The timing of the assessment of the quality of the embryo is very important. I mentioned before, the embryo has to show to be metabolically competent. It has to be in the position of creating such a structure, which differentiates here the inner cell mass, which makes later on the baby itself, from the trophoectoderm, which are here the surrounding cells, which will be in charge of generating the placenta. And taking some of these cells, so this means not touching the embryo so far, taking some of these cells that are representative for the whole embryo, we can assess with highest predictability and highest precision if this embryo is genetically competent or not. And then we decide which of them to transfer and not, and even not losing time and increasing a lot our efficiency. Here we see this in the scale of quantitative and qualitative disorders. It's not the same starting an IVF cycle with 16 or 20 cells as starting it with 5, because nature foresees that from all the eggs, nearly 90% could be fertilized, but only 40% are competent enough to create blastocysts. So if we have in an aged woman around 40, 42, only 4 or 5 of those eggs in a stimulation cycle, and only 40% of them can generate such a strong embryo, and only 17% of them are genetically stable, then you can see the deep significance of these findings, because this is like closing the window from both sides. The number of available eggs and the quality of them make it, from a certain point, impossible. This is why time is really the most relevant factor. Here we see some of the predictive values we always study diagnostically on our patients. This is the age for sure. This is the number of antral follicles. This is there are certain hormones that led us then to algorithm. This is a formula where we can calculate, even depending on how many eggs we expect, what is the age, and what are other predictive factors, how much effort we need in order to provide with a 95% confidence interval at least 1 or 2 euploid blastocysts. So we don't just try stimulation cycles without knowing that at the end we will have at least 1 or 2 of those embryos with a higher live birth rate than 50% per embryo. So both together we can close to 80% baby at home, independently of the age. Using that algorithm, This means sometimes we need more cycles, but this is a transparent way. We can estimate the time we need for and the efforts, and the patients can decide. This is a quite novel approach, which at the end means also that we share the risks with our patients. We're not just blindly starting cycles and then we will see. We can advance through our technology and our big data and the artificial intelligence we are using to evaluate this. We can predict what will happen even before, and we can inform our patients about their genetic risks and their chances at all, which in our eyes it's the fairest approach we can offer to them. In some cases this may not help, or we are too late, and in Spain, maybe you know, or most European countries, despite of Germany and Switzerland, the egg donation is the last corner for making those kind of dreams come true. This is obviously a pragmatic solution, but most cases this arises even from the incapability of achieving results with that. And obviously in women between 44 or 46 or 47, the chances of conceiving with their own eggs are, I have to admit honestly, for me, for my clinic, and for the whole medical institution, the chances are as good as non-existent. Yeah. With own eggs. With donated eggs, they are as high as they would be 25. But there are a lot of other issues then, psychologically, sociologically, religiously, to take into consideration if making this step, which is not the issue now of this lecture, but just to mention, so you should know that having a big pool of donors, we can provide donors to most of our patients that need that in a way that they are genetically extremely close to them. We can check not only for matching the appropriate donor to them, we can check genetically if there are higher risks for conceiving a child with certain diseases. We can exclude these risks. This is also genetic technology, and at the end we can match very close to the needs of the patient. It's quite complicated and not the topic of this lecture, but I just can tell you most of them forget about the fact that this was a donated cycle once they conceive. And there are hundreds and thousands of families that could help to parenthood this way, and that are extremely happy, even 18 years after. So here, this is the genetic matching I mentioned. Sorry, I spoke before showing you the slide, and there are around the egg donation, around the working with IVF, around working with IVF and other technologies. At the end of the day, which matters is that we have to offer to our patients a tailored solution to their needs. And there are so many profiles as possibly people, yeah? And our approach is always individualizing each case, studying it consciously at many levels in order to offer to them first what is the safest, second what is the most efficient, and third what is also in their whole lives fitting better. Yeah, there are a lot of factors that account to that. And as closing remark, I would say the improvements in the genetic diagnostics during the last 10, 20 years have helped our reproductive technology to be much more precise, to be much more efficient. The background of disbalances at genetic level are more than evident and known since ever. The delay in motherhood and couples looking for creating families later, as nature has foreseen it, which is usually between 15, so physiologically, and 25, is a challenge to us, because this is also true that in the history of humankind, the life expectancy was also 35,000 years ago. Maybe it was 50, 100 years ago. Now, our life expectations and longevity is beyond 80. We spend more time in education, in establishing our lives, and physiologically our cells have not noticed that. So there is a shift between our biological existence and our social existence, which technology like IVF and genetic tools can help to close. And now I think we are both of us open to questions you can write on. We would read them loud and answer open to all of you attendants.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for the presentation. We will then go to the questions. And
we are good in time, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, great. Great timing. Okay,
so several times. This is why.
This will be the first one. I have low ovarian reserve, MAH 1.7. My husband has severe male factor infertility. What treatment would you recommend? Is there any treatment to improve sperm count or DNA fragmentation of sperm, or to improve ovarian equality? And we have one more information, I think, which is also quite important to that. I'm now 41 and husband 43.
Okay, I think this is a very interesting question. But first of all, I would not say this lady has low ovarian reserve. An AMH of 1.7 at 41, we would need to know how many antral follicle she has. But she is obviously still not still in the window or in the gap where she could come to a successful treatment. Regarding the other questions, which kind of treatment I would recommend? Possibly the one we have highlighted during this lecture, and this is working with own eggs for sure. As long as she is ovulating, she has this AMH and still ovarian reserve, but it's just a matter how many times she would need to get stimulated in order to have at least one or two metabolically and genetically competent blastocysts. With that algorithm we could use, if we would know more from her, this is the treatment of choice, what we call embryo banking with PGS. Then the other question of the fragmentation of the sperms, this is something which is well known, that is associated with lifestyle, which is associated with age. We usually let the males work out during 2 months an antioxidant high doses therapy, We measure the fragmentation after, again, and if not improved, then there are other ways of improving this. Sometimes a little bit painful, but this is not true because we do this under local anesthesia, but this would be the extraction of the sperm cells directly from the testes that overcomes all these problems of fragmentation. So this is something that we use only in certain cases where there is nothing else to improve. And the more general question, if there is something magic to improve the sperm count or even the ovarian activity, like drugs or like there is certainly not. Yeah, we have some studies running with growth hormone, for example, that may help to make the ovaries 1 year or 2 years younger, behave younger. They make it not younger. There are other approaches also for males using certain hormones or anti-hormones. But at the end, this is a field of research which is very interesting and that will give us a lot of surprises during the next 10 years. This is something that will not help current patients, but there are research efforts now in putting for example, the stem cells of your own inside the ovaries or inside the testes in order to generate newer and fresher cells that behave much younger as the biological ones. And this is something without risk. This is something which is like an auto-transplantation, has no rejection risk and things like that, and which is very promising. But it is, I have to remark it, something for the future. Nowadays, we don't have such magic tools.
Yet.
And thank you for explaining this and for the question, of course, as well. This one is a long one, okay? I don't know if you can see the whole thing, but I will try to read that. Good evening. I have a few questions. I have had failed transfer with IVF-Spain last month. We used donor eggs and my husband's sperm using TESA. I had a scratch in March before my real cycle, but still had a failed transfer. I have been recommended to have the ER map and a diagnostic hysteroscopy before the next transfer. We may not be able to come back for transfer until October or November, so would it be recommended to have a scratch again before the next transfer? I have also been told that I need a general anesthetic for the hysteroscopy, and I wonder if this is necessary, or can this be done with the local anesthetic? Also, I have heard that there is better success rates with a frozen embryo transfer. Why is this? My final question is that we have 1,3-BB recommended, 1,3-BB and 2,5-BB blast frozen, and I wonder if it would be recommended to have the 2,5-BB blast transfers on the next cycle.
So first, I have to say, unfortunately, she got not pregnant with egg donation. Egg donation has the highest implantation rates in human reproduction, up to 70% per embryo, which is a lot. Yeah, cumulatively even up to 95%. Cumulatively means after 3, 4, or 2, 3, 4 transfers, depending on a lot of factors. But this means also that in 30% of the first attempt, it doesn't work, which is non-surprisingly. So this can happen. And this is possibly the reason that led our doctors to further want to investigate if there is something in the endometrium that led to such a result in order to prevent it. this ear map, for example, or there are other tools, immunological ones or infectiological ones, or some of them also anatomic, that can be solved with hysteroscopy. Others can be solved with a proper timing of the drugs if the implantation window is displaced. Others with antibiotics if there is some kind of chronic infection behind, and others with other kind of drugs that increase the blood flow inside the uterus, because these are the main factors of implantation failure. Having said that, my recommendation to her, knowing that she is our patient, is something I would like to tell her as my patient in a separate way. But now making their case also open to others, I would prefer to generalize the case, and in those cases, regarding the question of the scratching, for example, if she pretends to make a transfer in October, making scratchings now makes absolutely no sense, because the effect of the scratching just lasts for 1 to, the best case is 3 months. This is something that even ancient gynecologists also knew at the beginning of the 20th century. Everybody knew a woman who lost a pregnancy and got scratched had a certainly higher chance of getting pregnant in the next cycle. This is due to the pro-inflammatory reactions that are linked to this physical scratching or procedure, but even the effect only lasts 1 to 3 months. So if she wants to make the transfer in October, then she would profit of making the scratching better in August or September. This is for sure. And then regarding the air map, the air map is also a scratching, but I would like to see this completely different. She would for sure benefit from an endometrial receptivity assay, and of knowing if the implantation window is normal. This is independently of the transfer. It should be just done before, because we need then to extract the conclusions and apply them for the next cycle. And if she has now time, she could make it now, or even she could make it together with scratching, let's say, in August or September, because we just need 2 weeks to have the results, yeah, and then to apply the conclusions to the next cycle. And in general, I would tell her, as long as she has good embryos and we are able to go deeper in the analysis of the endometrium, that their chances are still very, very high. And she should keep calm, and she should try to relax and to see the bottle half full instead of half empty. This 70% of implantation rate is a gift from heaven, yeah, because usually in a natural cycle, even having sexual intercourse at home, the fertility rate of any cycle is always lower than 20%. So having in one shot 70% of chances of conceiving is something which is great, yeah. And she should keep on and fighting, and we will support her, and we will achieve that together.
Thank you for the answer and support, of course, as well. Let's take the next one. What would be the cost for no implantation with 2 euploid embryos?
The cost of implantation of euploid embryos depends on if it's an embryo banking, if it's a normal IVF. So a normal IVF means in women younger than 40 with a good ovarian reserve, we just need 1 stimulation, then the genetic analysis, and then the transfer, always frozen. and never 2 embryos. This is for the past patient. I forgot to answer the question of transferring 2 is bad, immunologically non-efficient. And the cost for that case, for example, this is something about around 7 or 8,000 euros. If she would need 1 or 2 runs more, yeah, then the second run doesn't cost again 7,000, or the third, no. Then we have a pack. So this is why we use this algorithm, and despite if she needs 2 or 3, but even more than 1 stimulation cycle, then the price is something around 12 to 14,000. And in egg donation, this is easier and much more efficient. Not always necessary, but if you want to go for a shorter time to pregnancy, then PGS is helpful. Yeah? And in those cases, the costs are ranking without PGS from 4 or 5,000 euros, as with PGS to 12,000, something like that. So there is a product for each need. We would need, obviously, to know much more details from her.
Thank you a lot for this answer as well. And let's take a look for the next question. What do you do with mosaic embryos?
This is a good question, because in former times, mosaic embryos were thought to be true mistakes of nature, which means an embryo that starts with 1 cell and then divides to 2, 4, 8, 16, 30, 200 something before it implants, is by definition is monoclonic. So this always comes from 1 cell. And the finding of mosaicism means that in further stages of development, we could find, for example, 7 cells that were healthy and 1 that was not. And then the question was the original cell already damaged? So that the truth is that it was genetically bad, or is this something that happened during the first cell divisions? Whatever it is, which is not clear yet, the fact that those embryos could so the unbalanced cells could overtake the control of the embryo and make a bad embryo of it, is something we have more and more eliminated from our possible explanations, because apparently exactly the opposite happens. If you have embryos with many healthy cells and 1 bad cells, there is a capability inside those cells to correct themselves. Yeah. So at the end, it is a casual finding and non-relevant finding. But for safety, as long as we have a diagnosis which shows there are some of the chromosomes that are unbalanced, we used not to transfer those embryos at all. In the last years, and by evidence of the literature and many other groups that are also going through research in these areas, we have learned that most or many of those embryos, as long as the mosaicism does not affect one of the bigger chance for aneuploidy chromosomes, which are mainly the smallest one, the 21, the 22, the 16, the number 18, those that are also compatible with life, yeah, those embryos should not be transferred even by the mentioned risk. But all others that never would implant have apparently the capability of restructuring themselves, and despite they have a lower implantation efficiency, they still give healthy newborns. And in a game where in the worst case it would not implant, and in the best case it would give you a healthy newborn, this is a game we can play and we can recommend to play because there is nothing to lose. And sometimes there are so few embryos from couples that it's worthy to try with mosaic embryos as long as the mosaicism does not affect the crucial life compatible chromosomes.
So if I may maybe add something, in IVF Spain, as Dr. Aizpurua said, a couple of years ago, transferring mosaic embryos would have been unacceptable. Now, we were waiting quite a long time for the very good paper published from the Oxford group, I think 2-3 years ago, showing that mosaic embryos have lower implantation rates, but still are capable of generating a healthy newborn. So that's why in IVF Spain, we developed a protocol where we transfer mosaic embryos, but patients have to be aware of lower implantation rate, of higher miscarriage rate, and we, as doctors, as professionals, we want our patients to have healthy babies. So we transfer mosaic embryos with disclosure that patient is aware that during the pregnancy amniocentesis should be performed. Means that to majority of cases, if embryos are affected with mosaicism, it can go in the direction everything is okay. We have a healthy newborn, but in order to achieve a healthy newborn in the pregnancy, we have to be very, very cautious, and we have to assume a whole responsibility. So this is in the pregnancy. When we see a cycle, and especially with patient own eggs, embryo banking, difficult cases, low ovarian reserve, mosaic embryos in IVF Spain are never transferred upfront, as the first embryos transferred are euploid, healthy, genetically normal embryos. If we see that we ran out of these embryos, they are not more available, then of course we transfer mosaic embryos, but patient has to be aware of risks. We sign it, we assume this risk, and if in the pregnancy patient undergoes a proper check, means there are 3 big ultrasounds in each pregnancy, 10, 20, 30 weeks of pregnancy, amniocentesis should be performed around 16, 20 weeks. Yeah, so definitely will be transferred, not upfront, with certain risks assumption.
Thank you for explaining this together. And please let me come back to the previous one, because we have, I think, a little misunderstanding. What would be the cause, not cause, of no implantation with euploid embryo? And if you can just give us an answer, it would be great.
Yeah, I think it was some kind of language problem. Dr. Aizpurua understood a cause, and she's asking about a cause. Why euploid embryos are not implanting?
Why non-euploid embryos?
Why euploid? Why genetically normal embryos do not implant?
Because this is a matter of embryo and mother. So there has to be established a dialogue between embryo and uterus that drives implantation. And implantation is quite complex, and it's mostly a matter of the embryo. The embryo has to express around 500 factors, yeah, which is the first message of an embryo to the endometrium. So here I am healthy, I am fit, and then in this dialogue, the endometrium has to answer to the embryo in order that he activates further factors of implantation with an appropriate response. And then, obviously, it's not only a matter of the embryo. This is why euploid embryos sometimes do not implant, because the response of the endometrium is, for example, oh, I am sorry, I am on the wrong hormonal window, for example, endometrial receptivity window, which we cover with the ERMAP. I am now on 6 days of transformation after progesterone, and this is too late for you. You missed the opportunity because we had a bad synchronization. This is a main cause of implantation failure, or even the answer of the endometrium is okay, come over, but be aware because I have an immunological problem with a lot of very aggressive immune cells here around that you should behave quite strong, or otherwise they will kill you. This is another very classical cause of implantation failure, immunological problems. Or even the endometrium says, come over, but I'm not sure if I will be able to provide you with enough nutrients or blood or oxygen because I have some kind of vascular disease. And this is the next reason of implantation failure, that the endometrium is not able to generate new vessels in order to make the placentation happen and in order to provide the embryo with the right amount of nutrients. And as you see, this is not only a matter of euploidy. What is for sure is that aneuploid embryos will make the wrong question and will, if they implant, make the wrong way of making a pregnancy develop further. So this is not conditio sine qua non. This is not a cause without any other implication, but this is the basics of implantation is that only euploid embryos have really a chance of giving healthy newborns. And this is what the edge that we are working on. And even if after egg donation with euploid blastocyst there is an implantation failure, then we have to take into account all other issues I mentioned, like infections, like immunology, like right timing of hormones, like right supply of blood, which is linked to new vessel formation. And we are close to achieve 90% of implantation nowadays. So through research and so on, and for sure this will still get higher with time. But the higher you climb, the thinner the air. So it's very hard to fight for further 1 or 2% in implantation. Yeah, but we made a lot. Yeah, bringing the rates up to 70, 80, 90, which are possible nowadays. And there are a lot of factors, but for sure, euploidy is the most important.
Thank you, and huge thank you for explaining this and coming back to this question. And we will take then the next question, which is, what is the success rate for first round donor eggs?
Okay, we have to focus on the quality of the cycle always. So the fact, as Dr. Aizpurua mentioned, when donors are young, they have very good quality of eggs, and then the embryos that they develop are always A-B very high quality. So the chance that somebody will be pregnant with the blastocyst through egg donation after first transfer in IVF-Spain after one transfer is over 70%. The plans that we develop for our patients is very important for us, a certain security of a patient. Sometimes 70% after a long journey, unsuccessful IVF cycles is not enough for us. So in IVF-Spain, the best programs that we have to offer to our patients are either exclusive or exclusive plus egg donation, means that we would like to offer our patients 3 embryos on day 5 of development. And then with one blastocyst, the chance that you'll be pregnant is 70%. The rest of embryos is frozen for you from the same donor. So if in case it doesn't work, we have different tools to see why it hasn't been working before. So before we transfer the second time, we recommend uterus lining biopsy to see the timing, to see the implantation window, to see immunology. We perform, in selected cases, hysteroscopy if there are any anatomical doubts. And then, after such preparation, we transfer the second embryo. So, after 2 consecutive transfers in egg donation, your cumulative pregnancy rate after 2 transfers is 80%. If we see that this is not working after 2 transfers, good quality embryos, young donor, good endometrium double checked for receptivity, endometrium double checked immunology, and still not pregnant, then we transfer the third time. And then we add, usually by the third time, immunological protocols, like depending on the uterus lining results, like if there's an NK issue, then we give enchalipid. If there is a TH1, TH2 ratio, immunological incompatibility, we go for tacrolimus or other medication, okay? So after 3 transfers with exclusive egg donation, over 90% of patients that we treat in IVF Spain have children at home. For some patients, 90% security is not good enough. And then the plan that we have that gives us a lot more security is exclusive plus egg donation, where clinic gives you a guarantee of 5 blastocysts. And if we see that we transferred 3 good embryos from the first good donor and we still were not able to achieve the pregnancy, and there's nothing frozen for you from the same donor, the clinic is obligated to generate 2 more blastocysts for you without any extra cost to fulfill this guarantee. And then quite often, if we match the second donor for you, then we match this donor to you immunologically. Yeah, we match it with your HLA. So after this kind of cycles, where the risk and responsibility is taken not only by the patient, but also through us, over 90% of cases have children at home. And this is, I think, the best we can do. We also have programs with day 3 embryos. Pregnancy rates are lower, but available. We have pregnancy guarantee, diamond program, where clinic stimulates 3 different donors for you with genetical testing, where we offer 9 transfers, means 3 transfer per each donor to give you the pregnancy guarantee. Yeah, and then if this doesn't work, there's the financial compensation. Yeah, so it's case-to-case dependent. So this is these are the pregnancy rate in IVF Spain with egg donation cycles.
Thank you for the answer to this question, and the next one will be this. I am 38 years old and I have extremely low AMH levels, 0.3 to 0.4. I have done 2 IVF cycles, each yielding only 1 aneuploid embryo. In the first IVF cycle, I was given the maximum amounts of fertility medication allowed at my doctor's office, and I only had 2 eggs retrieved, 1 aneuploid blastocyst. The second IVF cycle was done with minimal stimulation, and again I had 2 eggs retrieved, 1 aneuploid blastocyst. Would you recommend I try another IVF cycle with my own eggs, or should I go straight to donor eggs? Thank you.
Could you tell us the age again of a patient, please?
38.
38. 38. So, you know, when we see this kind of stories, it breaks our heart, okay, to see that somebody is fighting so much and it's not happening. So, one of the most challenging cases that we have ever received in IVF Spain was a 27 years old patient with this kind of AMH. Lower than 0.5, and we were still able to generate 2 embryos in 1 cycle, relax 2-3 months, 2-3 embryos in the next cycle, 2-3 embryos in the following cycle. We did embryo banking 3-4 cycles, and I will never forget it because we were able to transfer genetically normal embryos right after the last cycle. And 2-3 years later, patient came back for the second child. She was already menopausal. We were able to grow the lining with artificial hormones, and we were able to achieve the pregnancy from frozen embryos from her after this embryo banking. So always, before the decision is taken, what do we do with the patient? We have to see 3 factors of your ovarian reserve: your age, your AMH, and antral follicle count. Sometimes when patients are young, under 35 years old, through their age, they can generate good genetically normal embryos. When the magic number, we are approaching the magic age number in reproductive medicine is 40 years old, we see that still blastocysts are generated, but they could be genetically abnormal. So if you are strong and you want to fight for your genetics, then we'll be more than happy to perform embryo banking with you. And in IVF Spain, the dose of hormones is your AMH adjusted. It doesn't make sense to stimulate somebody with high dose of hormones when your AMH is low, because no matter how many hormones we're going to put, you're not going to generate us a lot of eggs. So maybe mild or low dose stimulation, and then 2-3 cycles to do embryo banking, to find embryos and focus on their euploidy. In IVF Spain, we work very pragmatically with patients, means one step is 1 year in your treatment. So I would give myself a time in 2019 to work with your own eggs. If we are able, yeah, with the algorithm counting genetically normal embryos which are age dependent, that, you know, the dream, the goal in embryo banking is at least to have 5-6 blastocysts. Okay, if it's doable, then you have a chance. If in 2019 you do embryo banking, we look for genetically normal embryos, and there is nothing there, then psychologically for you, I think in 2020 you should slowly think about the egg donation, and we'll be more than happy to support you with this.
And thank you for explaining this and the good answer. And we can take a look for the next question. I did the ERA test during the test cycle and you took estrogen and progesterone. First question, is it important to take the same dosage of estrogen and progesterone in the transfer cycle as in the test cycle? Second one, or yeah, we can take one by one if you prefer, of course, no problem.
Yeah. So to the first question, for sure. So if you want to apply the conclusions of predictive test like the ERA test or the ERMAP test or any other endometrial receptivity test, you have to do it under the same conditions for the test as for the real transfer. So doses makes a lot. More in the progesterone, to be clear, than in the estrogen phase. The estrogen phase is less important, but the progesterone is the drug that transforms the endometrium and that makes the path of the timing for the embryo. As the word itself says, progesterone is pro-gestation. This is the strongest progestational drug that exists. It maintains and allows the pregnancy to happen. So the conditions should be the same. And for the adjuvant drugs she mentioned after transfer, like heparin, aspirin, prednisolone, there is an evidence that they help for certain circumstances. For example, heparin helps a lot in clotting disorders, what we call thrombophilias, and in those cases, it's not just an option, it's mandatory to use it, because otherwise the risk of losing the pregnancy or even of having severe problems during the delivery or after the delivery, even life-threatening problems for the mother, are important enough. But why to use these drugs for everybody? This is another question. It can be used for everybody without making many $1,000 expensive complete testing of the thrombophilic stage, for example, which in most of the cases can show the reasons of recurrent pregnancy loss, or in others it can't. The compulsive use of these drugs is also sustainable because there is nothing to lose. It is known that heparin for a couple of weeks, or aspirin for a couple of weeks, or prednisone for a couple of weeks doesn't harm neither the embryo nor the uterus. And the possible gain in detected or even undetected problems in the clotting factors, or even also in the immunology, another effect that many people don't know about heparin is that it triggers the regulation of immunologic cells. Nobody knows why and how, but it does. So the compulsive use of these drugs, or the preventive universal use of these drugs, can also be sustained. So it definitely impacts in the window of implantation, helping. This doesn't affect the hormonal window of implantation. Absolutely not. This is a complete other issue. The hormonal window of implantation is driven by progesterone, and these drugs does not affect by any way the effects of the progesterone. So are different things, and both of them can be used together without interfering with each other. But you have the possible win of using them because you are covering more risks as if you don't use them. Regarding the last question, if the result of the era is still significant using these drugs, the answer is yes. This gets not affected by those medicaments. Yeah. The result of the ERA test is something intrinsic to the hormonal response of the tissues in the endometrium, which depends on estrogens and progesterone, and which is highly replicable. So if you have an implantation, a window of implantation, a certain window of implantation, you will have this window of implantation every time until you get pregnant. After a pregnancy, it might shift. Yeah, we have quite experience with that. But as long as the drug application conditions are the same, it does not affect in any way the result.
Thank you for answering every question. And this will be our next one. Time lapse can be expensive. Can it help to monitor the best quality blastocyst to transfer?
Yeah. There are different ways of choosing the embryos that should be transferred upfront. So the time lapse shows us if embryos have reached certain stages in development in the certain time, and allows us to predict if this embryo is going to develop to the successful pregnancy. And that's why in IVF Spain we use a Gary system that is watching the embryo all the time. And embryos are divided into A, B, and C. Quality. A, quality embryos are those embryos who have completed certain stages of development in a certain time with the highest predictive value to develop with pregnancy. B embryos, B quality embryos, are a little bit slower, but they are still fulfilling these criteria. Maybe not as quick as A, but still they're almost there on time. And we see that pregnancy rates with B and A quality embryos are very comparable. C quality embryos are very slow. I remember when I started working in IVF-Spain, we had an amazing Catalan embryologist. And on Saturday morning, you know, you want to come and you want to transfer just A quality embryos because you are there on Saturday. So it's a free day. So this way, you know, you want to do your work as soon as possible, as quick. And she showed me a C quality embryo. I hated this embryo. I said to her, what kind of embryo are we transferring here on Saturday? And then she said to me, Dr. Szlarb, please do not ever underestimate one embryo. And believe it or not, this C quality embryo was able to generate a pregnancy, and I've also seen a baby, okay, out of this C quality embryo. So, you know, different time-lapse systems have different criteria to decide which embryo is good and which one is bad. But then the nature sometimes is verifying this, you know,
compensating. Yeah.
Exactly.
Can I add another aspect which is also interesting? It's like this. C or low potential embryos still have 20% of chances of implanting. So this is not a case that the chances disappear at zero. B class or mid-range embryos have something about 50, and high range have around 60, 70. But the most interesting thing is that the time-lapse can be a predictor of euploidy too. And coming back to your question that if this is expensive or not, it's not that expensive. If you pay 500 euros for having an embryoscope or a time-lapse monitoring of your embryos, that may give you an estimation of euploidy, not with 100% certainty of a PGS, but with 70% accuracy, the time-lapse is able to predict if this embryo is euploid or not. Then you have for 1/6 of the money of a PGS, very accurate estimation of the genetics of the embryo, by the way.
And thank you for the answer and your story as well, Dr. Natalia. And the next question we will take a look is egg donation anonymous in all parts of Spain? If yes, is there a possibility or initiative that egg donation becomes open anytime soon?
Open. There is a big misunderstanding regarding this. The fact that the Spanish law foresees that the donation is anonymous, this is only anonymous for the parents in order to avoid a bias of selection of donors by reasons that have nothing to do with reproduction medicine. Like, for example, in the United States happens, where recipients may choose the donors by their IQ or by their educational level or by their looking or by whatever. This is, in our eyes, a very bad way of commercializing medicine, because it's not a matter of having the perfect child that you would not have had by yourself. It's a matter first of achieving the dream of getting a child at all. And our compromise by law in Spain is to give the recipient the most similar donor that we can, not only by appearance, also by educational background, also by genetic background, most close and similar to her, which is in our eyes much more fair than choosing by other parameters possibly unexistent or perfect donor in a perfect world, which is the wrong thing. So this is why parents have no access to the data of our donors, and it's a medical issue to match the appropriate donor to them. This is all about anonymity, because what is mostly wrong understood is the fact that the newborn or the child, when it is or she is 18, has the chance to track back who was the donor. This is foreseen and guaranteed by European law. So the fact that in Spain we call this anonymous, it's anonymous for the parents, in order to avoid influences in the selection that are non-medical. But for the wealthy and the psychological and the right of the newborn to know who are their biological progenitors, there is still the possibility for them under Spanish law to know. So, having said that, I don't think that we need to have a change in Spanish law regarding this. I think much more that other countries have a need of changing this in the sense we are doing. And the facts are very evident. In Spain, we have donors. In other countries, nobody has donors. So we make dreams possible. Others just theorize about how to make it perfect, but they do not achieve anything with that. This is not a matter of the rights of the newborn. They are provided and safe under Spanish law. It's not a matter of comparing also donations with adoptions, which are completely different cases. I would understand that also the parents of an adopted child would like to know who were the biological origins, and the newborn itself. The newborn even more, because in adoptions, most of the psychological issues that arise, that they felt somehow rejected. So this is why they needed to look for a second chance family. In egg donation, exactly the opposite occurs. There are couples that are unable of childbearing, that are looking for advancing love, advancing interest to a child that gets generated only for them. So there is no rejection, there is no psychological drama at all. And comparing both and trying to push the European laws in making donations open and non-anonymous, and to compare adoptions with sperm donations or with egg donations, in my opinion, has not contributed anything to increase the happiness in families and to increase the number of families that could have a child this way. Even the opposite.
A huge thank you for this detailed answer to this question. And we will now have another one. Research shown successful sperm recovery in Klinefelter syndrome 47XXY PTS range from 16 to 66%. ICSI candidates, but slightly increased risk of aneuploidies for sexual chromosomes and other trisomies. What would you have your experience regarding KS, Klinefelter syndrome?
Klinefelter, they can have perfectly healthy newborns as long as the sperm production is there. There have been different approaches of selecting the sperm cells with the right amount of chromosomes in vitro before fertilization. A lot of efforts during decades. Very complicated, because once you manipulate the sperm cells and you run them through a cytometer to select them, they get somehow damaged, and then the efficiency of the whole cycle decreases. So this is why nowadays what gets tested is the embryo itself. then we have a clear picture of which of them are carrying some of the disbalances provided by the sperm cell or even by the egg cell at the same time. Because we have seen before, even 30-year-old women have 40% of disbalanced embryos just by their age. If you take then additionally a male factor with some sexual chromosome disorders or even other chromosome disorders like translocations, or this gets added to that risk. So the chance for them to have normal percentages of sane embryos is lower, but it's not zero. They still have a chance, and with the PGS technology, we can distinguish that efficiently.
And thank you for the answer. And let's take a look for the next question. How long does the embryo baking take?
Embryo baking, very well, summarized. So
1, 2, 3, 4 cycles.
it depends on your ovarian reserve. So when patients are coming to us, we always take into consideration their age, their AMH, and antral follicle count. The goal is, if the AMH is under 2, and now we have to be aware that there are differences in units between us and UK. So we work here in nanogram. UK are working with mole, and then the UK units you have to divide by 7.4 to have Spanish or American units. So depending on your AMH result, if we talk about AMH under 2,
cycles, 3 months.
So AMH under 2 means you have to work double, at least 2 cycles. The goal is 6-8 blastocysts. So the first cycle that we do is predictive for us, means we do it now, we see you achieve 2-3 blastocysts, you are undressed for 2-3 months, you recover, and then we do the second embryo banking cycle to have this 6 blastocysts and see your age dependent how many are genetically normal. If we see that somebody has a very low AMH, like AMH 0 point something, but still young.
A 2 cycle takes 3 months.
3 months, not more, not longer than 3 months.
3 or 4 cycles may take half a year, something like that.
So we have usually 2 months gap between cycles. Yeah, so 2 embryo banking cycles are 3 months. 4 embryo banking cycles are up to 8 months. Yeah. Now, first cycle is very important. Are you able to generate embryos or not? If you are able to generate embryos, we push you for 1 cycle more in 2-3 months. If we see that after 1-2 cycles, we are not able to achieve a blastocyst, then we have to seriously discuss other solutions. We do not treat in IVF-Spain patients 7 IVF cycles. After 2-3 cycles, we know if we can help you with your own eggs, with genetical testing of them, achieving 70% dream per transfer with euploid embryo, or we have to move on to egg donation.
But also we can predict it from the very beginning with a high accuracy using this algorithmical formula. So we usually, what we predict happens in 90% of cases. Yeah? But obviously, sometimes there are surprises. The cycles work weaker than we expected, happens. But sometimes also the opposite. They are much more efficient as we thought. And we have planned a patient for 2 cycles, and in the first cycle we have enough good embryos to transfer. So we have a prediction, and then reality puts it right.
Thank you for this answer. And we will try now with the long question. I don't know how much of it will be visible for you, but I will try to read that in parts, okay? We have also some questions. Is there a dependency of egg quality with regards to the stimulation level? Low, good quality, high, bad quality? This is the first question.
Obviously, you can overcook eggs during a stimulation. So what you need is an appropriate doses, yeah, of the drugs. To give less has an impact on the quantity. Then you have less eggs. If you give too much, then maybe you have better numbers or better numbers of oocyte, but the quality is impaired. So you have to choose the appropriate dose for each case. There is a lot around that in the literature. Okay, second question.
Second question, is PIXI or MAX useful to select sperm for ICSI diagnostic OAT3 DFI 17 to 24% chromosome distribution norm range?
So it's my personal opinion. Yeah, there's a lot of controversy around PIXI. Around MAX, there are much more evidence. PIXI or IMSI, all these things may help, but not enough. MAX for fragmentation is not the right approach. MAX is for apoptosis. MAX works selecting those cells that may have or not fragmentation, but have already started the cell suicide program. They get then eliminated by MAX. So this has nothing to do directly with the fragmentation. This has much more to do with the annexin 5 extrusion of the cells in the first phase of apoptosis. Okay.
Third one, could the sperm diagnostic result to be cause for failures?
Diagnostic results?
Results to be the cause
yes,
for failures.
Sure. There are very poor profiles of sperm that, as I mentioned in the lecture, may affect the epigenetic capability of the embryo development, for sure. And the fragmentation can also affect the activation of certain genes. We spoke before about 500 genes that the embryo has to communicate to the endometrium to implant. If the male part of these genes is fragmented, maybe those genes cannot get activated, and then you have an implantation failure, for sure. The male factor is relevant.
Yes, the fourth one, how is the chance to perform an ICSI treatment with those results in comparison with normal sperm?
With fragmented sperms, she means. The chances are perfect. So ICSI is very easy. ICSI just takes one sperm cell. The issue is how to put this high fragmentation level down. And there are different approaches, as I mentioned also before, some drugs, antioxidants. There is a very natural trick to overcome this. We call it HEF protocol. This means high ejaculation frequency. If the male ejaculates every second day during the last 10 days before fertilization, most of the fragmentation disappears. So it's quite easy, right? And even if this all doesn't help, we also have mentioned before, instead of selecting the sperms by inefficient ways under the microscope, we better take the sperm cells directly from the testes.
Yes, and the fifth one, what will happen if you select a sperm cell with DNA fragmentation for an ICSI treatment? Will the fertilization be successful? If so, will the implantation be successful?
This is a good question because it is evidenced and shown in big meta-analysis that the fragmentation index does not influence the fertilization index so much. So there are other factors like capacitation and others that influence the fertilization more. So the impact on fertilization is low in high fragmented cases, but the impact on activation of embryos that depend on reading some of the genes that the male also provides that maybe are broken on the promoter region, which is essential to activate the gene, then we in fact can observe that the blastocyst rate of those embryos is lower if we use fragmented sperm as non-fragmented sperm. So, and the implantation is also lower. but the fertilization not.
And the next, which is 6. Yeah. Is a PGS-PGT useful? We heard about poor pregnancy rates, and we think that the price-performance rate is not that good.
So PGS and PGT are diagnostic tools. So this is widely misunderstood. This is like magic. No, this is no magic. We just can see which of the embryos have a chance or a better chance and which have absolutely no chance. Obviously, from a given amount of embryos. Using PGT doesn't make the embryos better, also not worse. The embryos or the core, the family of embryos, is the same. So it's true that at the end of the day, if you put all these embryos one after the other, you will catch up the best ones too, sooner or later. And this is the difference. You are losing time because transferring embryos that have absolutely no chance, they give you a pregnancy that gets lost. Then you may need a curettage. Then maybe it gets infected. Anyway, you lose time. If you take a look also to the costs of a cryotransfer, which are usually in Germany, like €1,000, in most British clinics around 1,500 pounds, and in Spain between 1,500 euros. If you take all of these approach sales for zero chance, this is much more expensive than the 2,000 or 3,000 euros you invest in selecting only those embryos that really gives you a chance. And by the way, you shorten the time to success extremely. Instead of making 5 blindly transfers, you concentrate on 2 transfers that are crucial. And instead of losing 8 months of time and maybe decreasing your chances for the next stimulation, you just use 2 months in order to know everything about your chances. This is the main benefit of PGT.
Yes, and now 7th recommendation. Wife, 33 years, AMH 1.4, 14 failed ICSI with 3 abortions. Men, 38 years, OAT3 DFY 70 to 24%. Fish analysis, no abnormalities. What is your recommendation? Egg donation or additional treatments with own egg and donor sperms?
No, never egg donation with 33 and an IMH of 1.4. What she needs is an accurate diagnostics before. And now I understand the question with the fragmentation index and so on. So possibly she would benefit from an ICSI using the sperms directly from the testes, which is called TISA. Regarding her, she would possibly benefit from advanced stimulation protocols. And once we have, or the embryos could be generated, she would for sure benefit from the genetic analysis of the embryos. But with 33 and an AMH of 1.4, it's too early for egg donation.
Okay, and thank you for this long question and your detailed answer. And now, is it necessary to have a general anesthetic for the hysteroscopy, or can this be done under local anesthetic?
Depends on the pain tolerance of each patient and the anxiety grade of each patient. We have some that don't need anything, yeah, and so for diagnostic hysteroscopies, yeah. But if she is very anxious and feels stressed under pain, we don't use a general anesthesia, never. We just use sedation, yeah, or strong painkillers, opium-like, that, by the way, make you feel happy. But general anesthesia is usually not needed for diagnostic hysteroscopies.
Yes, and we will take a look for the next question. Should I make ERA test if I have 2 attempts of implantation?
Definitely, ERA test is the correct approach if we see that somebody has transferred with 2 good quality embryos. It slowly under the definition of recurrent implantation failure, and definitely this person can benefit from receptivity assay. In our office, we have patients that we transferred genetically normal embryos, and we were not able to achieve pregnancy. Some of them have receptivity window moved to 7-8 days. Yeah, it sounds like a science fiction that you put blastocyst day 5 embryo and prepare the lining with 8 days progesterone. But you know, when it has not been working in 2 attempts, there must be something in the uterus lining that stops implantation. So I would focus definitely on ERMA. Yeah, if not, maybe also immunology. Yeah, the test that we have developed is for receptivity and immunology to see maybe there are immune cells in the lining that see embryo as a foreign body, and depending on the results, adjust a timing of progesterone and also adjust the immunological protocol.
Thank you for the answer, and we will take a look for the next one. My husband has low sperm count. I have a good AMH for 36 years old. We have tried IVF but had 3 failed rounds, 2 chemical pregnancies and 1 miscarriage. Would PGS be recommended? What's the difference between PGS and PGT?
Okay, PGS stands for pre-implantation genetic screening, and PGD stands for pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. Means screening is performed for number of chromosomes to see if the embryo is not affected with the Down-Edwards-Patau syndrome with number of chromosomes, which can cause the implantation failure. PGD is performed usually when patients are carriers of genetic diseases like cystic fibrosis or are sick. We in IVF-Spain treat quite often patients for sickle cell disease where there's a blood issue, and if we know that parents have a diagnosis, then we can test the embryos. Now, the question is, we had 2 failed cycles. My husband has low sperm count. So it has to be seen how low the sperm count is. And then in IVF-Spain, when the hormonal results of male allow us to treat him, then when testosterone is low, FSH is still okay, then some of them inject medications to improve the sperm count. So if the hormonal results allow us, sometimes men for a couple of weeks before fertilization are injecting the same or similar kind of hormones that women are injecting for IVF. So this is how we can improve the count. And then definitely above 35 years old, pre-implantation genetic screening is highly recommended. And then if you eventually develop genetically normal embryos, then your chance to have a successful pregnancy is 70%. It's like everybody else who has a normal sperm count. Yeah, so we shouldn't be like nervous about low sperm count. In sperm quality, we have to see the count, the motility, the morphology. Okay, so it's not only about the count, but it's also if the sperm cells are moving, how they look like. Yeah, sometimes the count is low, but other parameters are okay, and you have a chance like everybody else to get pregnant. Problems start when you have low count, low motility, low morphology, or cryptozoospermic. Yeah, then we have a problem.
Thank you for this answer, and we will take 2 questions at once. How do IVF-Spain test for immune problems, or do they prescribe medication without testing for immune issues?
No, in IVF-Spain there is no medication without indication. Yeah, in order to treat somebody, we have to know what do we treat somebody for. So the most sensitive immunological testing is, of course, the uterus lining biopsy. Okay, the tests that we get from blood are not as sensitive as blood. So basically, on the 21 of a cycle, in test cycles, when we perform the receptivity map, we also perform immunology map for a number of NK cells, Th1, Th2 cells ratio, and then depending on their these results, we treat according to indication. To each indication is different immunological protocol. So this is how immunological testing works. If we see that in IVF Spain, patient failed first egg donation cycle, or if we see that a patient is coming, difficult cases coming from different centers, of course, we focus on the blastocyst development of the embryos to have this cumulative pregnancy rate, as I was discussing before. And then second donor quite often is matched to the patient with her HLA. And then we know that certain key receptors demand certain HLAs.
Thank you. We have still a lot of questions to go, but if any question will stay without the answer today, we will forward everything to IVF Spain, and I believe that we will send the answers back. We will take the next question, if you of course let me. Will you time the drugs that we have the best chance of implantation?
Majority of centers transfer in substitute artificial cycles, means with artificial hormones, we mimic patients' natural cycles. We put patients 15 days on estrogens. Day 10 of a cycle, usually we perform the scan to see how thick the lining is. The goal is between 7 and 12 millimeters. If this goal is achieved, then we know that this dose of hormones is well adjusted to your body, and we continue with the dose. If we see that this dose of hormones gives us the bad results, like lower than 7 millimeters or more than 12, then we have to adjust the dose of hormones. Yeah, so this is why the 15 days with estrogens are for. Then when you put embryo to the lining, which is prepared with estrogens only, this embryo will never stick. So then we have to add 5 days progesterone to open implantation window. 70% of all the patients have implantation window of 5.5 days progesterone. 30% of patients are super sensitive and need 6-7 days of estrogens and progesterone to open implantation window. So this is how majority of cycles are planned in IVF Spain. Very seldom we transfer in natural cycles. We are afraid, especially when patients are coming from abroad, that there will be dominating follicles, that they are going to produce progesterone before they should. This could be a mess, okay? So majority of cycles are artificial substitute cycles, which the timing is very well controlled.
Yes, and we will have the very similar question, so maybe just we will continue with that. What can be done to improve the answer of the endometrium during implantation?
Mm-hmm. So what can be done to improve? So the first problem that we can meet is the thickness of the lining, okay? There are some patients that had manipulations on the uterus lining performed in previous cycles because of miscarriages, curettages, DNCs, and then the lining has an issue to grow. With transvaginal Viagra, sildenafil, it's not a commercial, okay? But we have seen improvement that probably the vessels of the uterus lining dilate, estrogens can come better to the womb and can grow the lining. In cases where we have tried everything, yeah, we have treated patients with the highest dose of hormones. We have tried with Viagra and still it's not working. Then IVF Spain developed a program where the hysteroscopy is performed at the beginning of your cycle, and then microneedling. It's like mesotherapy, especially for those girls that do a lot of aesthetics, improvement of their face. You know, with microneedling, the small cells are getting activated, and especially in the womb, what we see is that the stromal cells at the bottom of the lining are getting activated, and the plasma, the serum from your blood is injected subendometrial, under the superficially, but under the uterus lining, to move the cells that are there that are not ready to perform any action, but through microneedling, through this procedure that we kind of adapted from aesthetical medicine, we see that the growth factors are being produced, and some patients eventually are able to grow the lining. I had to do the summary of these cases last year. Out of 9 cases, we had 3 live births after regenerative medicine of endometrium. Especially, we had a couple of cases with Asherman syndrome, means adhesions in the womb, and with the regenerative medicine, we were able to have successful growth of the lining in certain areas of the womb, and we were able to achieve 3 pregnancies. So this is the best we can do.
Thank you a lot for answering this one, and we will take a look for the next one. We have used stem cells to stimulate aging ovaries and premature ovarian failure. They're not so encouraging. How are your results in Spain? Our stem cell lab is in India, as we have good number of researchers there.
There is no treatment for that in Spain, and none published in any other country to our knowledge. There was a group in Canada around the company which was called Over Science, which tried to show results in these regards, but they closed the company. And to my knowledge, there are other groups in Europe making basic research on that, but this is far away from clinical use.
We have a partner clinic visiting not long ago. In IVF-Spain, we focus on genetical quality of embryos, and with realistic AMH approach. It's very school medicine. If you want to give us more recommendation, drop email to patients. We'll be more than happy to recommend you somebody from our partner clinics here in Europe, yeah, to support you in this situation. In IVF-Spain,
but this is not realistic. There is nothing, not in the United States, not in Europe, under clinical use. There is basic research around that. If there is someone telling these patients that this exists, I would be very conservative in evaluating this.
Thank you for answering this one, and we will take the next one. I had this month in France a failed IVF, 2 days transfer, but failed nidation, implantation, which means from French, I think. What might be the causes?
Implantation is a matter of infectiology, of immunology, of enzymatic and hormonal activities, of endocrine and paracrine ways, and of rheology. This is blood vessel formation and blood flow. Only an assessment of all these factors in an appropriate way could bring us closer to a successful implantation. And nowadays, the maximum implantation rates that can be achieved with one embryo are nearly close to 90%, which is a lot. But there is still 10, 12% where further research is needed. Yeah. But before I made the simile to the dialogue between embryo and endometrium, this is the right answer to that. So this is a dialogue, and there are a lot of factors involved.
And this dialogue should happen with day 5 embryos, yeah, because day 5 embryos give us higher success rates than day 2. So maybe next time, if the cycle should be performed, why don't we focus on blastoses, yeah, and after 35, why don't we focus on genetically normal blastoses? So we'll be more than happy to perform IVF cycle with genetical testing.
Okay, so thank you a lot. I think that we don't have any more questions for now. All the questions which was maybe without an answer, we will take tomorrow. We will forward this to IVF Spain and then forward the answers for you as well. And I would like to thank you a lot for your presentation and attendance of everybody who was with us today, and Dr. Aizpurua and Dr. Natalia. I also would like to encourage you to attend the next IVF Spain webinars, which are also listed here. And yes, we were happy to have you here. IVF Spain, thank you a lot. If you have any additional words.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure, and thank you for organizing those kind of events.
Yes, thank you a lot. Have a good night. Have a good day wherever you are, because I believe that we are having different time zones here. Thank you one more time. See you next time. And this will be a wrap. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.